So in the China examples, you're talking about the nature of what research is allowed to be done.
Mhm.
And that struck me as fundamentally different than the example of Jordan Peterson here at McMaster, where some research directly draws conclusions that are generally of a relatively narrow nature. And then
Mhm.
some people take a series of conclusions and advocate a position. And I think we find in the social sciences and psychology and some of these fields that it can get a little sticky
Mhm.
about sort of how far extended beyond research findings someone asserts and where that line is. So I'm curious about these sort of distinctions between the integrity of the research process and then the
Mhm.
extensions beyond narrow findings of individual research studies.
Great question. And let me reiterate my caution. I don't know a very great deal about that one case, but let me tell you what I hear in the question and to the little extent I've read about the case. I do think that research integrity is a fundamental issue. You can say about Jordan Peterson, and I guess many people would say about Jordan Peterson's research, it's crappy research. It's bad research. And if you've done bad research, then we have all these mechanisms in place in academic life to shut down bad research. And there's a peer review process, and the peer review process basically says, well, you can't publish that because your findings are crap. And there's also, just the kind of academic discourse where one person publishes one set of findings and then another person enters and publishes another set of findings. The University of Chicago Calvin Report says we should meet bad research with better research. That's how science works. So if we're critical of the research, then the way to be critical of the research is through the academic peer review process or through doing better research. And the data that we're using for the VDOM, these are publicly available data sets. And it's like yeah, anyone wants the data, I'll give you the link so you can run the models yourself, because if you can do better, then that's how science works. If someone is leveraging crappy research to make a political to do the political criticism, I mean, research to criticism that is basic. So that is a basic tenet of academic freedom. But what about if it's bad research? And what about if it's a flawed criticism because it's bad research? Then it starts to evolve into something else. It starts to move away from academic freedom and move toward just political statement, just political talk. So I do think the McMaster case, to the extent I know about it, I think it's pretty gray. There are a few different things happening simultaneously, and bad research may be the place where it starts on shaky ground.
Yeah, I'll say I don't have any information to form an opinion about the nature of the research itself. I guess I'm more responding to what I see in a general way of almost a call on academics and an experience of sort of needing to speak to issues within their realms of expertise, but not directly linked to what they have done, and this sort of ex- extension into critique. And I thank you for addressing that, because I think I get a little worried about that being part of academic freedom because of the positions of power within university and the sense of people being experts. But I think that that is part of the wobbliness of this that you're describing, that people can recognize this as a slightly unique right and have to wrestle with the complexities of it.
Let me just say that, so as a excuse me, as a practical thing, if you remove that from the index, the models come out the same. So one
Mm.
thing you could do is to say, well, that's a funny dimension of it, or that's an awkward, and in fact, historically, that's true. If depending on where you are in the world, that's fundamental to academic freedom or not.
Mm.
But you can extract it from the index, and the index still works the same. So the overall findings are robust. Um, but I agree that of the components of academic freedom, the freedom to use academic research to challenge the power structure is the most contested and the kind of least standard dimension of it. So, and you're right, there are pressures it's a whole different talk, but it's really interesting that there are pressures on academics to speak about all these things that they are not necessarily experts in.